1938. For 6 straight Academy Awards in a row, Walt Disney has proven himself to be the undisputed king of the theatrical short subject area. But will somebody finally break him this year? Will somebody finally steal that win from him? No, not at all. Ferdinand the Bull is the silly symphony that takes the cake this time around, directed by a man named Dick Rickard, one of his animators during this time. Ferdinand the Bull is an adaptation of a short story of the same name, about a kind little bull who likes flowers, who is thrust into the world of bullfighting against his will. The story is perhaps better known nowadays for its feature-length adaptation in 2017, done in glorious CGI by Blue Sky Studios and featuring John Cena as the titular bull. Oddly, some sites list this as not a silly symphony, but for clarity's sake, we will call it a silly symphony right here. Now, what about the runner-ups? Ooh, yeah, Disney definitely was not to be outdone this year. This is the first Academy Award for Best Animated Short Subject ceremony where there are more than 2 runner-ups. In this case, 5 cartoons were inducted in the ceremony in total. And 3 of these runner-ups right here are Disney cartoons. In second place, we have The First Mickey Mouse in the Wild, The Brave Little Tailor, also based on a short story of the same name. This one a fable. Unlike Ferdinand, which was more contemporary. William Roberts, another very obscure Disney animator, not to be confused with the club singer who would eventually provide Michigan J. Frog's voice, was the director for this one. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. Mickey Mouse is the titular Brave Little Tailor. This short is best known, however, for the scene in which Mickey describes how he allegedly killed the flies, which leads to him being forced to take on a giant because everybody misinterpreted his 7 with 1 blow comment as 7 giants with 1 blow rather than 7 flies. The scene in which he describes how he did it is masterful character acting provided by a man named Bill Teitla. Teitla was one of Disney's top animators, and he actually was one of the few who genuinely loved his workplace outside the 9 Old Men, to the point where his biggest regret was leaving Disney in 1943 to go initially back to Terry Toons, where he started, then the Famous Studios, then the Terry Toons again, then a bunch of other places except Disney, including a very brief stint for Warner Brothers, until he died in 1968. Why Walt Disney wouldn't hire him back is unknown, but he delivered some of the best animation for the company during this time. And who does that scene in which Mickey describes how he killed 7 with 1 blow exemplary of that? In third place, we have Good Scouts, the first Donald Duck cartoon on this list. Donald Duck was so popular, along with Goofy, that in 1938 and 1939, respectively, they were spun off into their own series, and it was argued these were the main draws of the short subject series, not Mickey, who was becoming an increasingly bland everyman, whom by this point had his mischievousness replaced with a kind, good-hearted personality that would remain for the rest of his career and remains to this day. Yeah, it's easy to see why Donald Duck was more popular than Mickey, because His faults are so present that they make him a more interesting character than Mickey. In this one, he is in the Boy Scouts with his nephews Huey, Dewey, and Louie, who by this point were just introduced like a couple months ago, in the Scouts with him as well. Disney was being distributed by by RKO during this time, and budgets were huge thanks to their loose distribution and their amazing success. And wow, does it really show in the animation here? It proves that you can make a funny cartoon even with Disney level animation. The director of the short was somebody named Jack King. King was one of the OG Disney animators. But he left the company in 1933 to move to Warner Brothers, where he initially continued animating but was then promoted to director. He remained there until 1936, when he moved back to Disney over not being able to direct a color cartoon. Disney granted him his wish almost immediately, since the studio was in full color production by this point. Now, Jack King's Looney Tunes aren't that well received, especially since they starred the universally bland Buddy most of the time. And his equally bland interpretations of Beans and Porky thereafter did not do him any favors. So you might think that he did just a couple years before fading away into the limelight. You have no idea how wrong you would be. King was considered to be the foremost authority on Donald Duck. He would continue directing shorts until 1948. And lots of these shorts he directed are classics in their genre. And these include a couple more Academy Award nominations. Good Scouts, of course, being a standout. I will get to more of his backstory later when we do the other Academy Award nominations that he did. In fourth place, we have the exception I was talking about, the one that wasn't from Disney. Fleischers stole fourth place from Disney with their color classic Hunky and Spunky. Directed by Dave Fleischer, animated by Myron Waldman and Graham Place, with a musical score by Sammy Timberg. This cartoon's success was such to the point where Hunky and Spunky actually became recurring characters. Hunky is a mother donkey watching over her younger son, Spunky, and they basically go through various misadventures together. Hunky was retired in 1941 when the Fleischers ceased production on their color classics and moved on from Paramount eventually. But Spunky actually remained in the game sporadically until 1958, so he is the oldest recurring character from the studio, the oldest recurring major character from the studio, that wasn't Popeye or Betty Boop, or that wasn't licensed from another place like Popeye, and excluding Betty Boop and all the other recurring characters created during the Fleischers. I think he is one of the only Fleischer characters besides Popeye and Superman to remain in use after the Fleischers actually left Paramount. Speaking of Fleischers and leaving, the 1937 Fleischer strike hung high over the Fleischer brothers, especially since, with the success of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Fleischer wanted to create their own animated feature film. So, it was decided in 1938 that they would move from their beloved New York location into Miami, not only to break the strike, but also to bring in massive tax cuts that would probably help with the film. Many of the animators for the Fleischers objected to this move horrendously, including their then prominent female voice Mae Questel, and they promptly stayed where they were at. Thankfully, the Fleischers not only had access to their core animators, mainly Seymour Neidl, Willard Bousley, and David Tendler, the most important three of the bunch, but it also allowed them to reunite with a bunch of their old staff that had left the studio for other ventures, like James Colhane, Alfred Euscher, Grim Natwick, and Bill Nolan, as well as many. In addition to that, the studio also received a talent boost in the form of the several animators from Warner Brothers that left the Fleischers following the departure and firing of Frank Tashlin. Especially Mr. Robert Bentley, who would go on to be one of the most prolific animators across all studios, almost all studios. How Miami would actually do, I'll get to later, much later. But for now, let's just wrap things up with 5th place, another silly symphony, Mother Goose Goes Hollywood, directed by Wilfred Jackson. It's something that actually takes a few cues from Looney Tunes, in that it's not a cutesy romp like most other silly symphonies, but rather a down-to-earth, very ballsy, very contemporary retelling of Mother Goose fables with tons and tons of celebrity caricatures thrown in. I ultimately prefer this one over Ferdinand the Bull, in case you're wondering. But yeah, in case you notice here, the fact that Fleischers remained a thorn in their side, even on Disney's best day, shows just how much of an archenemy they were to Disney. But, unbeknownst to anybody, this rivalry would soon fizzle out. Albeit very fizzle out. And how will it fizzle out, unfortunately. Oh, and another major thing that happened in 1938. The MGM department decided to establish their own cartoon studio to be produced by Fred Quimby. Because Harmon and Ising was no longer with them, they had to, for the time being, hire several exports from studios like Van Buren, or the few Harmon and Ising staff that didn't follow Harmon and Ising when they were fired, and the like. Some, I think, actually came from Disney. Others came from Warner Brothers, who coincidentally would buy out MGM's library. But I'll elaborate next time. So for now, this is the Man from Wackyland, signing off and notifying you that was 1938.